Welcome to the Green Building Show, where we investigate green design and building trends throughout Australia.
Welcome to the Green Building Show. This week, we're going to kick off a brand new series on disaster design, which means building and designing for fire, flood and cyclone-prone areas. To kick off the series, I'll be speaking with NKT Architect's director, Nicolas Tedeso, who's going to explain the fundamentals of designing for a flood-prone area. In Australian style, we also get started on a new series. This time, we'll be looking at lightweight and sustainable homes in remote areas. To get us started, we're going to hear from Light Home Design Ambassadors, Penni Sutton and Jogen, who have got a lightweight and off-the-grid home in WA's Margret River region. In What's Hot, we will also bring you something new. For the last month, Light Home's team has been scouring the web for the best design blogs out there. I'm here today with Nick Tedeso. He's the director of NKT Architecture. Thanks for being with us, Nick.
My pleasure.
All right, so we're here talking about flood-prone housing. What's your take on flood-prone housing? Why is it important for Australia and New South Wales in particular?
Well, naturally to protect the asset. I think that's probably the most important thing. Probably the only thing more important than that is to protect the human beings that live in it. I mean, fundamentally, we all have a responsibility as professionals in this industry to protect the inhabitants, the end users. And if you are going to be building or designing in a flood-prone area, then you need to protect those people. Similarly with a lot of other areas such as fire.
Okay, and we've seen recently the devastation that flood can cause throughout Australia. I guess, is there a bit of a lack of information out there or a lack of legislative regulations in terms of building in a flood-prone area?
I don't think there's necessarily a lack of it. I think it's very confusing. There's a lot of confusion from council to council, let alone state to state. There are different requirements, different legislation. You can build two properties side by side. One would be in one council, one would be in another, and you have different requirements. It's not only confusing for the professionals, but I think it'd be significantly more confusing for the actual owner-occupier, who fundamentally is a layperson and entrusts professionals to do the job of building their houses. And if their neighbour has done one thing and then all of a sudden they're slapped with civil works requirements where the neighbour isn't because it's a different council, it becomes very confusing, and to the point where sometimes it destroys the dreams of a lot of people, in building their dream home and all that sort of thing.
And it can also have an impact on this lack of cohesion between the councils and between regulations. Can this have an impact on budget?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said before, if you've got two houses side by side and there's a dividing fence and one side is, Ryde Council, for example, and another side is, let's say, Parramatta, and they have fundamentally different attitudes. Ryde Council is, just to use an example, I don't want to pick on them particularly, but they're very strict when it comes to stormwater design, particularly if you have a property that slopes away from the road. Whereas other councils aren't as aggressive, because Ryde Council, I think the area had a rather significant flood in '74, which may have been just poor stormwater design, but the ramifications of that event, whatever it was, has created this requirement within the Ryde area. And people are constantly confused as to why they need to spend so much money. And we're talking tens of thousands of dollars for civil engineering, retention tanks, detention tanks, building above what we call a freeboard level, etc., etc., which means fundamentally you've got to build the house up and out of the ground, where, a little bit down the road or in another suburb, it just isn't an issue. Now, that could be a localised thing, and I'm not a hydrologist by any stretch of the imagination, but it does get very confusing from council to council, let alone state to state. I mean, we do live in a prehistoric land. Arguably, we have 30-year cycles, not your kind of typical annual cycles that, say, North America has. We're just coming out of a dry period, and now we're in this constant rain and constant flood, all of a sudden...
Sorry to interrupt, so what's the pitfall, so what's the potential pitfall there? Is it the fact that we've gotten too comfortable and we've built inappropriate housing?
Exactly. Well, one situation is that the drought creates this sense of comfort that a particular area doesn't flood, and so we just start to build and release new levels of land. McGrath's Hill, Pitt Town, without, again, I don't want to sort of defame unintentionally those areas, but they were areas when I was younger that typically had reputations of flooding because it's low-lying or whatever the reason, poor irrigation, I'm not really sure. Now, maybe councils have put stormwater design at the forefront. I don't know, but my anecdotal opinion is that there is going to come a time when those areas possibly will flood again, and everyone's going to be scratching their head going, why have we got brick veneer homes on slab on ground in these areas that are now flooding? Why don't we speak to the experts? And I'm a bit biased, but maybe one of those experts would be architects, to look at and work with councils, work with civil engineers and the like, and try and design more appropriate housing for those areas. On to
design strategy now. Did we get it right 100 years ago with the traditional Queenslander, or what would your take on a good flood-prone design be?
Well, in answer to your first question, I guess you have to look at it from a pound-to-pound point of view. Back then, the technology that was available to people, I think yes, absolutely, they got it right, both in terms of cross-flow ventilation under the house, lightweight construction, because they had limited resources, and it forced them to think about sparingly the use of materials. And now these days we just dig a hole, get big machines, away we go, and we flatten hills, and all of a sudden we're scratching our heads going, why are we flooding? Your second point, what can we do to improve the design? Well, you know, it's kind of back to the future. Absolutely study what we did in the past when we didn't have the technology we have now. As an architect, I suppose that's part of my responsibility to research things. Looking at the Queenslander, and I just cite that as one example, the way it's built up and out of the ground, it uses lightweight materials. That could be absolutely something we could look at, but unfortunately there's an intransigence or an inflexibility with the way that the normalcy, I'm constantly throwing this word, well, that's not normal in terms of construction these days, and I think what people are referring to, or builders may be referring to, is the project home tectonic. Your brick veneer, your slab on ground, you cut and fill the land, build a retaining wall in between if there's a bit of slope. Well, instead of doing that, maybe we can look at leaving the ground the way it is, letting water go where it needs to go, and stop pretending that we can control it, and build things up out of the ground, using lightweight, letting the water flood, giving some people somewhere where they can be protected whilst the water is surging and rising and disappearing again. Okay, great. So in layman's terms, what would a flood-prone house look like? Can you describe it to us? Would it be, you know, a slab with stilts and then a water-resistant lightweight material? Firstly, establish the freeboard level. Discuss it with both council, civil engineers and the like. Get that level and then establish what's best for the area. Using materials, whether it be a solid base and light top or the stilt construction, which is often the most cost-effective, getting up and out of the ground. And then because you're building up and out of the ground using lightweight structure, you then need a lightweight top. And so heavy brickwork, and to create that faux brick veneer, it's inappropriate. Top heavy, light top, it looks visually wrong and probably will keel over or requires a lot of structure to support it. So the lightweight materials that are around at the moment, most of which there's a lot of research going into lightweight waterproof materials, or water resistant. Nobody's giving that proof thing anymore. It's 99.9% bacterial free. Yeah, looking at that, the use of those things in a clever way. And part of that is absolutely looking forward, using that technology, but my personal opinion is that maybe we can look back to the past and see how they got it right or wrong and learn from that as well. Great. Nick, thank you for your time. My pleasure. Thank you.
So we're counting down Lighthome's hot design blogs. What did you find this week, Mark?
So this week we came across a really cool design blog called Design Hunter, which has images of sustainable housing, just kind of cool houses, gardens, a few pools and things in there. A lot of different design elements that you can actually draw on for your own home design, but pretty much Design Hunter being anything cool, fun, funky, with that sustainable slant. Design Hunter is written by Kim Mcfayden, who is a self-confessed recovering lawyer. She's into everything design cool, who just collects images from around Australia and a few images from around the world into cool design and sustainable design. You can catch her tweets in the Twitter sphere at The Design Hunter.
I'm here today with Lighthome Design Ambassadors Penni Sutton and PB Jogen. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Carl.
Fantastic. And we're talking today about a lightweight home called the Lakeside Residence in WA's Margret River. It was designed by Matthew Johnson Architects. Can you tell us, guys, why did you choose this product for your ambassador's choice?
Right. Pete, you go first.
Oh, look, we just thought it was such a great project, not only from the perspective of it being, of the building, which is, has got a lot of sustainable credentials, but also what the client is trying to achieve. The rehabilitation on site. It's a sanctuary for flora and fauna. She's actually involved with the zoo, so she's very passionate about the environment, and that comes through. This is a holistic, I guess, project in that not only is the architecture sustainable, but the whole concept behind it is sustainable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when we're dealing with the concept of sustainability, to have a client that is so dedicated herself to conservation it's like a marriage made in heaven.
Right, yeah, I find that very interesting. The description that I read, says, the client is a zoologist, with a real passion for conservation, like you said. And how do you think the home reflects that passion?
Well, it's wonderful. She's rehabilitating what was farmland to re-establish bird life, to bring back native species, to also bring back, and when we're talking about species, we're not just talking about animals, we're talking about plants as well, and that's really quite important. And the jarrah trees in Western Australia are, of particular beauty and interest, and have suffered a lot through logging. So it's great to see an area of land that is actually dedicated to just maintaining the beauty of our natural environment. Okay, great. And talking about the building specifically, it also says in the description that there's a great combination of sustainable building techniques. Can you elaborate a little bit on what these techniques are?
Well, the whole building itself is off grid, so there's no power, water supply or anything. So everything had to be sort of combined. So that's quite a technical, I guess, achievement to be able to combine all of those requirements for power, water, sewage, and do it in such a way that's sort of aesthetically pleasing, as well as producing a building that it functions well. So it's a combination of all those things that really impresses us.
So we've covered designing for a flood-prone area, but what about existing houses? We did some investigation and found a great CSIRO article, which we'll include in the transcript of this episode, which basically gives you some great techniques is to flood-proof your home. The article covers 2 flood-proofing techniques, one being wet-proofing, which assumes the water is actually going to make it into your house, and 2 being dry-proofing, which is great ways to keep the water out of your house.